A major audit rarely fails in the kickoff meeting. It fails in the last mile. When evidence is scattered, ownership is unclear, and controls exist on paper but do not hold up security. And in 2026, annual compliance is a myth. The regulations and customers are moving towards continuous accountability from modern cyber security governance. Example, the expanding of scope, governance emphasis on NIST CSF 2.0 to accelerate expansions in privacy and AI governance. Example are European Union AI Act timeline and India's DPDP rules 2025 notified, right? So the real question is, are you ready for audit, or are you audit ready, right? Or just saying audit hoping, right? Because of this uh, difference between what we say as claim audit and crisis audit is not intent, it's systems, evidence, and execution discipline. Giridhar brings that rare combination of GRC leadership plus audit practitioner lens and helps teams shift from control documentation to control as a trust. Officially, what I want to bring is we welcome you to the Controls and Trust podcast, where controls become credibility and compliance becomes boardroom confidence. Without further ado, let's welcome Giridhar to our podcast and dive into the topic. Hi, Giridhar. Welcome to our podcast, sir.
Hello, sir. How are you doing?
Good.
Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Giridhar, a short intro about yourself, your journey so far, Giridhar.
Sure. So I've been in the swimming in the GRC and InfoSec and audit ocean for probably about 20, 21 years. Predominantly, my experience has been in banks and in hospitals in India and in UAE, and a little bit in exposure in Oman, Singapore, and Philippines. So now I run my own consultancy, audit consultancy, and I've been involved in audits in nationalized banks in India.
Thanks for that, Giridhar. Let's dive into the topic, and let's start with what we want to understand is where
Mhm.
exactly does audit readiness break at the last mile?
See, most organizations misunderstand what audit readiness actually is. So they think, it's like a phase, something that you switch on the minute you see the audit email that comes in your inbox. Whereas in reality, readiness is an ongoing operational condition. It's not something that's like a switch on and off. So the last mile is where theory meets reality. All the strategies, policies, frameworks all exist, but the execution depends on people, timing, and most importantly, discipline. So this is where cracks become visible, especially when evidence collection is late, controls are executed, but it is inconsistent. The ownership is assumed, but it's not properly documented. So the key issue here is not probably lack of funding or intent, but it is the absence of a system that is repeatable in nature, and most importantly, the one that survives normal business chaos. Role changes, people change, tools change, competing priorities of different things that consume people's time. So let me give you an example of how it looks like in a real world scenario. So in a large bank, every control existed on paper. They would do a UCF, Unified Control Framework, and all the controls existed. But during the audit, when the auditor asked for evidence, nobody was able to answer one question: who exactly owns this control today? Who is the control owner? Nobody knew, because the original owner had moved roles in the bank and the backup had left. Because in some banks, after a certain period of time, you're asked to shift roles or move to a different department. That is a rotation of job responsibilities. So suddenly a critical control had zero accountable humans. It was just there on paper, but nobody was doing it. So the audit didn't fail because of risk. It failed because of an orphaned ownership. So the last mile breaks when controls survive longer than people. So this is what I mean.
Got it. So what you're saying is it's the ownership that defines who owns that control and how it is being shaped, whether it is constantly updated or it's still
Exactly.
managed by the owner that is left or moved higher to the next role is what we are saying.
Hmm.
In that case, what
Yep.
are the top three last minute failure patterns you see across organizations? Like you said, ownership is one thing, evidence,
Yep. Correct. Is
expectations, and
another.
timing. So, what is that you look at? How do you look these
Oh,
pointers?
hmm. When I see when I look across banking, healthcare, and perhaps other regulated enterprises such as insurance, so the last mile failures are remarkably consistent. There is a pattern that I've seen that emerges out. It and that's because that they happen because it's not that because people don't care. It's they happen because the systems are not designed for proof. So I'll give you three patterns. So the first pattern that I've seen is ownership decay. That is controls outlive people. Like you said, the original owner changes roles, the backup leaves, and suddenly a critical control is orphaned. There is no accountable human. This is one. So, because of this, while on paper the ownership exists, the control exists, but in reality, during the audit, nobody is able to answer audit questions confidently because there is no one there who is actually on the ground handling and managing that particular control. The second one was evidence is created too late, and this I've seen it happen fairly often. So evidence is treated as something that you assemble for audit, instead of you generating something as part of operations. Uh, when the minute you see that you're notified of an audit, then immediately different teams go around and they start gathering the evidences and packaging them. This is probably not in the good intent of the audit itself, because evidence gathering should be generated as part of the operations itself. Like when timestamps, logs, narratives are created after an audit notice is received, credibility takes a hit. Even if the control had technically worked well, there is always that element of trust that the auditor would probably not fail to see in its full merit. The third one is exception blindness. So, like most organizations design controls for the happy path or in an ideal conditions. But what auditors check really is what happens when the control fails. That is what we are really interested to see. Is the system still secure enough if a primary control fails? So if the exceptions are not logged, justified, remediated. So auditors assume that the control is not working, even if it usually does. So the last main failure is not about missing controls, it's about missing discipline, about ownership, timing, and exceptions to be handled. Because remember, the controls work in real life scenarios, not in ideal situations.
I got it. What you are saying is evidence workflows plus audit trail visibility is what you're talking about. And
Yes,
when we talk about security side of it, control effectiveness and the detection and response proof is what you are talking about in one sense. And
absolutely. That is correct.
on the growth side, what we look at is reduce audit friction to scale faster, because when you audit you need to see where we can scale it up faster is what we are saying in as many pointers that we want to look at. And how
Yes.
if audits don't fail in the meeting is what we started with, right? When
Yep.
policies look perfect and they don't perform is what the audit fails, is what we understand, right?
Yes, absolutely. That is
Yeah.
correct.
What what's the gap between policy coverage and control execution that teams underestimate?
Policy
Policy
execution.
coverage and control execution.
See, policy coverage is usually uh, this is one of probably the misunderstood concepts I've seen in organizations. What they see is having controls or the control um, the coverage or the footprint of the coverage. If they feel that if you have lot more number of controls, the system is effectively safeguarded against threats. That is probably not the case because what happens is if the spread is too vast, it is thin. So you
Hmm.
have a lot of ones, but it is not strong enough, is one. Second, if you have too many controls, each of them compete for the attention of the person, which he or she might not be able to give. So some controls get orphaned, some controls they assume that another person is going to do, and for some, there is no way to measure the effectiveness of a control because there just no isn't time. So you cannot derive KPIs or KRIs on the effectiveness of controls. So with these things that are blinding an organization, they would probably not know what are the controls that really matter, where we have to focus our attention on. So it is just a question of having too many things, but we don't really know which is the right ones and which are the ones that are not required.
I think what you're saying is intent controls proof governance equals accountability, right? When we look at how do
Yep.
we look at it, right?
Yep.
Technology side, when we look at embedding controls into workflows, not just showing it as PDFs where you say this is a document, please refer to
Yeah.
this, and this is where we stand, and this is a policy. That does not work, right? And when you map policies to threat informed controls, I think that's where the real execution plays a role, and that's where growth, where execution first compliance reduces rework, because the biggest challenge that we see is rework, right? And rework
Exactly.
and
Spot on.
delays on the project getting completed, right? So that is what I think, what we are looking. Policies are promises, controls are receipts, is what I would like to say when we look at this.
Absolutely. You're spot on. Spot on.
Right, so
Because policies are just promises, right?
yeah.
You'll have to, the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Yeah.
The control effectiveness with refutable evidences, which over a repeated period of time
Hmm.
provide the same result on the effectiveness of a control. That is what is acceptable.
Okay, got it. Now, coming to the next pointer that I want to understand, uh, when proof become a standard, or what proof standards should teams aim, especially when we're talking about the current SOC 2 ISO styled audits, because that's anyway not going to go off, but continuous monitoring and other things are going to take up. But how do we look at this? What proof standard should the teams aim for?
The proof standards, see, SOC and ISO in their own areas of expertise, what they are looking for is first they have different intentions. Now, SOC 2 is more from technological perspective. ISO 27001 is your ISMS, Information Security Management System. It's a standard and it has
Standard.
certain clauses and annexures that the audit looks for. Now, as a auditee, the first thing would what they would do is not treat it as separate by itself, but first look at their applicability to their working environment. Find out what are the controls that are currently there. Let's say, for example, identity and access management. So, an organization has a identity and access management. So they list out all the different things that they're doing. Perhaps they have a privilege access management or privilege identity access management, or they have just-in-time kind of an access system. So there is it's a good practice for organizations to map it to the respective annexure control in ISO, or its relevant control in SOC. So that way they would get a whole library of controls, and each control is mapped to something in ISO or something in SOC or something in HIPAA or anywhere else. So this gives a very visualistic picture of what is left out. It is very simple, as if you are cleaning a house and you have a lot of items and you start placing them in their respective shelf or cupboard or everything. Once it is done, and then you will know whatever is left out on the table, you'll feel, okay, this doesn't have a space, so I need to buy a new shelf or a new bookshelf or something. Exact same way. If we, the converse of it is, if I were to do ISO by itself, I run through, all the controls, and then when I go to SOC 2, for example, I may be encountering the same control that I have already deployed or implemented in ISMS, but I would probably not be aware of it. This would result in double work, something that you mentioned before in our conversation, which is very relevant. So the organization would apply more effort or duplicated efforts on something that is already there and working because they didn't know, because it was not mapped, it was not visible. So that, I think, is a right way for an organization to pursue its efforts and direction in getting their controls implemented, assessed, and being visible for ISMS and SOC 2 or any such control standards.
No, I get you. What you are saying is standards versus technology best practices always have a difference in the way it is executed, right? So when you say
Yeah.
define evidence plus sampling logic, right? So that is the strategy. Then automate evidence capture and immutable logs where possible. So that's what
Oh,
you should do.
definitely.
Yeah,
Yes, yes. Immutable
right.
blocks. That's a
Because
good one. Yeah.
logs can be altered if there is a, so you will have to look at immutable ones. Prove that controls are effective under real conditions, because when you put a control, it is tested when it is in the real condition, right? So that's
Yep.
where we talk about. And when we talk about the pointers that we want to look at is faster audits, faster enterprise sales, plus we'll have to look at partnerships and new businesses coming in when you have a strong audit policies and strong governance that is there in the implementation side, right? Now
Yep.
a control you can't prove is a control you don't have. So that's one point that we can say is, because if you are not able to bring up the evidence, then it is as good as not having a control, right? So now
Yep.
what breaks first when critical controls and evidence live spreadsheet worsening access integrity or audit trail, which one do you think plays a major role? Which one breaks first?
The one that breaks first is the auditor's trust.
Okay,
Uh, that's the first one. Now, if they're using Excel, right? I mean, Excel is okay. Excel is powerful and it's familiar, but it's also dangerous in regulated environments
correct.
because Excel does not have integrity traceability, and you can't change. You would not know who changed it. Uh, there is no authority, like a single source of truth. Now, I'll give you an example. In one of the audits, when the auditor asked, show me an example, and then the team brought one up in an Excel sheet. It was marked, that control was marked non-compliant or not implemented. After a while, another person said, no, it is implemented, and he brought in another Excel sheet. So now there are two Excel sheets. Now, which is the right one? No one knows. No. Its scenarios here is where Excel collapses. So we need a system that is robust, it maintains integrity, it has timeline so you can know the journey of a control from when it started, what approval cycles it went, whether it was implemented, was it found, as effective as it was intended for the purposes it was put, or if it failed or it was not enough, was there a complementary evidences or a supplementary evidences, supplementary control that was implemented. So these things cannot be done on an Excel sheet. You need a good tool, and tool is what also brings in accountability, because you have somebody has to log in, somebody has to enter data or upload something. So that brings in a sense of accountability, and somebody would know that they would be questioned if they didn't do it. Whereas an Excel sheet is just sitting on an email, probably not seen at all, or it's sitting on some file share, and no one really pays attention to it.
What we are saying is Excel is a powerful tool, but somewhere of the pointer that we are talking about Excels, because that's what is the predominant data holder for the organizations, and there is no other place where which can hold that kind of a data and that size of data where you can look at in a spreadsheet. What I understand is in the recent times, even having data on Excel is dangerous, is what I understand from a AI standpoint and a cybersecurity standpoint. So they want to move out of Excel sheets and bring in an interface which can look as good as just keying the information. But what is your take on that pointer? Because it's off the topic, but I just wanted to have your view when we
Mhm.
say spreadsheets are the vulnerable pieces that I see today in the market, right? So your take on it.
Yep. See, spreadsheets are either overshared because you can just forward it to anybody,
Mm,
or and they're underprotected. Even if you password protect an Excel sheet, it's very easy to break using a VB script. That is one. That's the biggest um, weakness, in my opinion, because that Excel sheet, like organizations, they use it as a database to store all their controls and um, or description definitions of controls and what works, what doesn't work. So if a person with malicious intent knows that an organization has this control and it is not working, it would
mm,
give him an unfair advantage to kind of enter into the system. The second, the second one is, like I said, version control. There are multiple versions floating around and nobody knows which is the right one. Third, integrity of data. Data can be changed and nobody knows who changed it, and there is no control to prevent it. You can lock cells, you can lock sheets, but it'll probably give you just enough comfort to know that you have protected something, but it's not. And there is no guarantee on the data that is there. So all of these things are best addressed using a tool. Now there are several GRC tools in the market. All of them strive to alleviate organization of the issues that they are facing with Excel sheets. The good thing about GRC tools is they continue to act as a database of all the risks and controls and every other information that is fed into it. It has very good analytics. You can pull out, you can do a lot of statistical analysis on it. It will give you very good forecasting. It's easy. Nobody has to, put in formulas or VB scripts like an Excel sheet. You can access control the tool. So you can give access to people who have to feed data. You can give access to people who have to only view them. As in the case of auditors, you can give them access, they can view it and they can come out. And the integrity of the data is preserved, and it is undisputed. What is there, if somebody has changed it, the tool will definitely log. And so you will know who changed it. And you can add controls. You can make sure you can implement role-based access control. It can be integrated with your Active Directory. And there are so many different ways that a GRC tool has a lot more advantages compared to an Excel sheet. And it introduces a certain increased or elevated level of trust that an auditor would like to experience, especially during audits. because the whole aim is, see, audit is not a fault finding exercise, it's a fact finding exercise. The
Right.
easier it is done finding facts, the lesser friction there is. And the lesser friction results in greater participation and, more importantly, appreciation of the auditee from the audit. So they would know that they would appreciate the fact that this audit is there to help them
Yeah.
improve and climb that maturity level in their security posture, which would make them look good in front of their senior committee members or board directors, and which in turn translates to better businesses when the consumers have trust in the organization. So it's a whole cycle, and it all starts with a tiny little tool.
No, I agree because now with the cloud adoption, what we see is security posture across the organization has become very important, and uh, everybody looks from your basic forms that you fill in, the kind of encryption that is used for your SSL layers, and most of the things are very very clearly looked at a security posture. How is my data going in? What is the cookie policy? What is the privacy policy? All these are very very important today. And as we were talking about Excel sheets, what's the minimum viable upgrade path from any Excel without boiling the ocean? So, is there something that we can have a view on it, Girir?
Sure. In an Excel sheet, the first thing is we would see, the goal is not to eliminate Excel overnight. Okay. But the goal should be that it's not that you pull a plug on Excel and from today it's no more Excel, it's something else. Because that transition takes time. It's more people. So, what the goal should be to stop using it as a system of record or as a single source of truth. That should be the premise on which the moving away or the sunsetting Excel and graceful migration to another tool can happen. So I would think that we can do it in three pragmatic ways. First is we define a single source of truth. So decide where the final control status and evidences reside. So Excel can be used for elementary level of analysis, but not as an authoritative record. There has to be a tool. Second is we introduce a controlled evidence repository. So what I mean by this is this could be like a very basic workflow or a document system which has access controls, timestamps, versioning, ownership, and good to have would be reporting, notification,
Yeah.
analytics, forecast. These are nice to have, but not essential. So an organization does not need a full-blown GRC
Yeah.
suite to begin with on day one. Graceful
Yeah.
steps, little by little, they do it. Third one, I would say, is define what evidence looks like. What is an evidence that we need to look? How often it should be produced, from where it should come, and who owns it. So here, consistency always matters more than a very sophisticated tool. So I would say this, that don't replay. I mean, not to the goal should be not to replace Excel as with a tool, but to
Hmm.
replace Excel with discipline, which can only be driven with a tool.
Got it. Giri. Now, what we are saying is source of truth should be there, and
Yeah.
right decisions should be taken. Right decisions, rights. And when we talk about workflows plus evidence of
Yep.
repository is one thing. Then access control is what we are talking. Now, coming to the Excel part that we are looking at, we are looking at integrity plus confidentiality risk.
Confidential.
Yeah,
Yep.
right. And risks is what we should. Weak audit trails is also is one pointer that can come in as when we look at. And now
Yes.
scalable compliance needs scalable systems is what you said, because the pointer that
Absolutely.
you said was you can have so many things done, but overnight having Excel getting eliminated is not possible, right? So that's one
Yeah.
thing. You will have to look at scalability very slow. Excel does not fail loudly, but it fails
But when
during the
it
audit.
does,
It does fail during the audit because if I write a VLOOKUP or some data which I have to refresh and it does not work, and it definitely fails at those pointers is what we see. But when you have a web tool or what you're saying, a documenting system, I think that flow is kept intact, right? So
Yep.
that's what I think is what we are saying. In practice, what signals control maturity to auditor beyond documentation?
Auditors look for certain signs that say that that these are mature. I mean, they want to see confidence in the controls itself and on the people. So one is consistency over time. Has this control been effective in doing what it is supposed to be doing over a period of time? Because every organization, they go through different um phases. Like banking organization during year end, the volume is very high where they have to close the books. Or during e-commerce web sites, the volume would be very high. So, I mean, transaction volumes, TPS, transactions per second, would be really will hit through the roof during festival seasons where there is some sort of um, sale or something going on. However, the control has to work regardless of what the situation is consistently. Second is clear ownership. So the auditors always want to see, is the ownership clearly defined for each of these controls, and does the owner exactly know what this control should be doing, and what is the evidence that shows that this control is effective? Is he reading some is he viewing some logs or reports or outputs of something that shows that this control is doing well? And it will only be done if the ownership is correctly defined and is held accountable. Third one is transparency in handling of failures. So when a control fails, and controls are designed by humans, and there is always a certain percentage that a control will fail because the operating environment changes. There may be new threats, there may be new systems that are being integrated which bring in their own vulnerabilities. A lot can happen. But the point is not to make sure a control does not fail at all, but it's to make sure that when it fails, are we handling it transparently? So if or is it ignored or is it over polished in the documentation to make sure that it is a perfect uh, live scenario? So these will tell you what actually earns the auditor's trust.
Got it, Giridhar. No, what we are saying is consistency, execution plus exception
I,
handling is what we are.
spot
Right.
on.
Yeah. What do teams overproduce that auditors don't value, and why?
This is very close to me, uh, and I will definitely tell you one thing. Uh, Team often overproduce documents and narratives explaining why something happened.
Yeah.
But what auditors really want is show me how you detected it, that something failed. Show me how you fixed it, and show me what did you do or any remedial actions that you took so that its reoccurrence is prevented. Okay, because the auditees tend to give a lot more documents and probably very pretty looking PowerPoint presentations or other slide decks, but that does not satisfy what the intent with which the auditor has come. So it has to be more with the control. Do you know who it is? Do you know, is it working fine? Is it consistently working fine over time? If something fails, were you able to detect it? Were you able to fix it? And what have you taken uh, to ensure that it does not happen again and again? And some sort of lessons learned that can be one. Have you incorporated this in your training and awareness sessions? Have you given training sessions to focused groups so that certain people of a group of people are exposed to more sensitive data than the others? They should probably give in some sort of additional feed so they exactly know what they needs to be done. So this comes as uh, an awareness, and that brings in a certain amount of discipline, which the auditor is really intended to see.
Now, got that point. Now, what you are saying is effective evidence plus timely remediation is what we are talking about. Stop
Absolutely.
wasting cycles focusing on high leverage of proof, because auditors don't need a lengthy document about a story and stuff. They, as you rightly said, how did you identify it? What is the leverage that you use to solve it, or
Yep,
what is the proof that you are providing, right? And
that's
these are
correct.
few things, and auditors don't want more documents. They want just to tell how did it happen, just plain truth, saying that what you did and how did you achieve it, right? So that's what
Yep.
I think what you're saying. Now, what are the three top evident bottlenecks? Collection, validation, or completeness?
Completeness usually fails last, not
Okay.
because teams forget, because no one had a clear checklist of what done or completed, what it really means. Controls run, but supporting artifacts are just partial. I would say the other two was
Collection
see
and
collection. See, collection is the one where, see, we all agree that during an audit, the evidence that resides is not in one single place. It is spread across different systems. We need a lot of teams to come in together to give their portion of the puzzle so that, the whole story is made. So these can come from IT, SecOps, DevSecOps, HR for training and onboarding. It can come from procurement, contracts team, legal team, privacy team, so on. So when evidence is scattered across tools, emails, folders, people, so when this happens at the time of the audit, teams spend a lot of time hunting instead of validating. What they should have done is if they had ideally collected all of these before, or if they had established a practice which involved evidence collection in a timely manner much before the audit, they would spend their time just validating it. So if collection is not automated or standardized, everything downstream slows down. This is a big one. It takes consumes a lot of time for the auditees itself. And so they always feel that audit is a chore and something it has to be dealt with, and it's not something that they have fond memories of. Now, validation is when teams collect evidence, but they can't answer with confidence three questions. Is this for the right period of the audit? Is this complete? And can you prove that this evidence is not altered or the integrity of it is withheld? Now, without validation rules, evidence is not an evidence. It becomes an opinion. It's not a proof, right? So this is also something that this bottleneck is something that I wish that the organization spend a little more time
yeah,
to ensure that it supports them in their journey during the audit, because the journey is done both by the auditee and the auditor.
better. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Now, what we are talking about, you define and RACI matrix, right? And plus you have the evidence SLAs. That's what we want to look at, right?
Yep, that is
Now,
correct.
automate, standardize, time stamp evidence capture also is one thing that we should look at, right? And
Yes.
evidence integrity plus secure retention is what we are seeing, right? Institutional knowledge beats heroics, right? We say I did this, but this is how the institutional knowledge gained over the period of audits that have been done, and based on this is the historical data that we have had, and this is how we did all these things, is what I think is one pointer that we can look at. Now, most teams don't fail controls, they fail showing the evidence, right? So, or the proofs.
Yes.
That's what
Yep.
we see as a very crucial pointer, that what is important, whether control applicability, what is in scope, what is noise. How do you look at this?
See, one of the fastest ways to kill audit readiness is overscoping.
Hmm.
What I mean by this is when everything is treated as critical, nothing truly is. So, risk based scoping is uncomfortable to begin with because it forces trade offs. But without proper scoping, the teams drown in low value controls while missing high impact ones. Now, framework provides certain options, I mean, not obligations, but a judgment is required, and the judgment has to come from risk based opinion alone. Now, I've seen both extremes, neither of them work. Now, something that happened very recently in a bank is they were trying to apply every single ISO and NIST control, NIST 853 specialized publication, every single control they tried to apply. So the result was hundreds of low impact controls, and there was very minimal focus on the high risk ones. So what happens is noise drowned the signal. In the case of a healthcare, see, not every system deserves the same amount of control depth. So, what I mean is, a life critical system demands stronger proof, a stronger control or safeguard compared to any other system. So, the distribution of controls has to be proportional to the system, which can only be viewed from a risk assessment. So, the risk decides scope, not the framework. So the ideal scenario would be for organizations to exactly scope what is it that is most critical to them? What are the crown jewels? What is their primary core business which is supported by technology, which is at risk? And they try to perimeter that, safeguard that with a fence. And then slowly go outwards. You start from the most serious ones and then slowly come down. So that way, there is not much noise and there is concentration of effort done in the right place so that the right controls are given the correct attention required for them to be implemented.
That point. Now, coming to our, when we say you should look at risk based scoping, is what you're saying. Mapping
Yes.
controls to business objectives is what we are talking about now. That's
Oh, yes.
controls harmonization plus crossworks is what we are telling, right? So that's the point that we are talking about. How do
Yep.
you decide what's truly in scope without over controlling everything? See, with this question, I once you give your thoughts, I have one important point which I want to add based on my projects. What do you, Giridhar?
Sure. See, without scoping, I mean, how do you decide like what truly is in scope without, over controlling or applying controls all over the place? Now, this is something that I have faced myself when I was in a role where I had to implement control and govern. So this is something that has helped me is first we have to remind ourselves that the scope is a risk-based decision, just not a framework-based decision. Now, being in scope is we'll have to answer one question. If this fails, does it really matter? Is it materially impacting customers or regulators or the business? Now, the scoping approach, you can have three filters. So first one is uh, assess the asset criticality. As with every risk assessment exercise begins, systems that process sensitive data, enable core operations like a core banking system in a bank,
Mm,
or
mm.
support regulatory obligations like in the case of hospitals, they automatically demand stronger controls. There is no area for negotiation here. Second is your threat exposure. Now, if you have internet-facing systems or you have integrations with third party where your information is being exchanged over the internet and you have privileged access paths, I mean, these carry higher risks and they deserve deeper control coverage. So you should have defense in depth and layered defenses. Third is the business impact. So if failure causes financial loss, regulatory action, probably like a penalty from a regulator, license cancellation, or any one of those, or loss of trust, which is very crucial in today's very competitive market. These systems always stay in focus, always stay in scope, regardless of how inconvenient it is. So I also would want to say what is out of scope, and we have to define it because now defined what is in scope is we know what is out of scope. That also has to be documented with a rationale. So this clarity reduces audit friction. So when an auditor sees that, okay, you have applied these methodology to determine what is in scope, he would also see, so what did you leave out? And if there is something that is clearly written and documented, it it reduces audit friction between the auditee and the auditor. So over controlling everything does not really reduce risk. It just reduces the attention span each control is given to, which is not an ideal case scenario.
What we are saying is there are cases of ideal scenarios that have to be really looked at also, is what you're saying, right? And threat plus asset criticality drive the scope rather than what we look at, right? And
Yep.
for fewer stronger controls scale better than many weak ones that you have, which are not having a control over it, is what I understand, right? So
Mm-hmm.
these are the points that, now what is one question that I want to ask: how many controls you really need? Because that's an important point. Every policy or this one has a process or control to be in place. What
Yep.
is the ideal scenario of how many controls do you really need?
Oh, this is a tough one. How many controls do you really need? At its surface level, it is subjective. Somebody would
Hmm.
say you would need 100, 50. There's no magic number to shoot for. So
Okay.
there is a false sense of safety in large control libraries. But size in this case does not equal strength. A small number of well-designed, automated, continuous evidence control always outperform a large manually operated control set every single time. And this is proven. This is a proven fact. So the question leaders should ask isn't like, are we compliant or what control really reduces risk and build trust? This is what they should be looking at. Like, example, in a bank in the Middle East, so there was a bank which reduced controls. They had about 180, 185 controls, and they reduced it to 65,
Hmm.
almost half. But what they did was these 65 controls were with laser point focus. They were stronger, they were automated, and they were continuously evidence. It was point in time. Any point in time, these controls would give you an evidence of what they did, and it was auditable. So this resulted in audit time being dropped, findings reduced, and trust increased. Now all of this happens because the number of controls reduced. They halved it, but the half that remained were twice or sometimes thrice as strong as the all the other controls put together. Now see, some of them are non-negotiable: identity and access management, logging, incident responses, vulnerability management. These do not go out of fashion and they don't go out of scope. Everything else is negotiable based on risk. So stronger controls always beat weaker ones. So the decision of how many controls has to come from an risk-based assessment that has to be made, and scope and the strength of each controls.
Got it. Give me a second.
Mhm.
Okay. Now I have the last question before we have few pointers that we have on the comments pointer that we wanted to look at, and then we will take it up. What what's the trade-off between control count and control strength is one pointer. Then I have, if you have to build a lean control set for scaling company, what are those non-negotiables? These are two pointers that I want to understand before we conclude, we summarize and conclude. Girdhar.
Sure. For the first one, the trade-off between control count and control strength, the trade-off is focus versus fatigue.
Hmm.
High control strength gives the illusion of coverage, but it often weakens at execution. So teams spread their attention across too many controls, quality of evidence drops, ownership becomes shallow, sometimes orphaned, sometimes not even documented. So, in contrast, fewer controls come with higher strength that tend to be clearly owned, better automated, and
Hmm.
they consistently deliver and they consistently evident. It can be evidenced. So, auditors read this as maturity, they don't read it as a weakness. There's also a human factor. When teams are asked to operate dozens of low impact controls and so many controls and not low impact ones, compliance itself becomes a checkbox exercise. And we have all seen that, probably been there too, where compliance is treated as a checkbox and. But however, when you have very few controls and they're meaningful, they're taken seriously by people. This leads to improvement. When people realize the value of a given controls, because there are not too many, they're just enough to safely uh, to guard the company. So they'll take ownership, they know exactly what it means, and they will find ways to improve it. So more controls feels safer, but stronger controls are actually safer. Now, you had another point on if I were to build a lean controls strength, right, for a
Yeah.
scaling company, the non-negotiable ones.
Yes.
Um, Now, if I'm building from scratch for a scaling company, I would focus on controls that create visibility, accountability, and recovery. I will not look for perfection at this point in time. That's not my that doesn't come in my top priorities. So my non-negotiables would be first identity and access management. Any person who is coming in should prove himself whom he claims to be, and he should be given access to those resources which he needs, and only enough access for him or her to do the work. So clear user life cycles, privilege access controls, and periodic reviews. This would be my number one non-negotiable. Second one would be logging and monitoring. Anything that happened has to be logged so it can be referenced back in future. So if you can't see something that's happening, if I can't see it, you can't really prove a control's effectiveness, or especially during investigative incidents. The third would be vulnerability and change management. So I'm not here trying to eliminate all the vulnerabilities. That's probably not possible. But what I would non-negotiable for me is detection of vulnerabilities, prioritizing to fix them based on the level of impact and risk exposure, and fixing them consistently so that it comes down to as low as possible. Fourth non-negotiable would be my incident response readiness. I should have clear roles defined, tested processes, and evidence that ensures that incidents are handled and they are not hidden by teams when something happens. Because we all know that incidents come unannounced. But if I have a defined process and if it is tested, When an incident does occur in the real world, the teams already have a run book. They have a playbook to exactly know what needs to be done, who needs to be communicated, what needs to be reported, and it stays exactly as per design. The fifth and the last one is governance. Now, this is something that I firmly believe that named owners, escalation paths, reporting, and a rhythm for review. By rhythm, I mean periodicity. What has to be given, who has to show data, where the data should come from, whom is the data being shown to at what frequency, and what decisions are being made. This entire life cycle encompasses your governance, which will bring in focus and attention and support from all portions of the organization, right from the senior executive level, right to middle management, to the people working at level one. So a lean control set, non-negotiable one, should, I wanted to answer three of my questions. It should be who has access, what's happening, how fast can we respond?
Great pointers there, Giri. So I would like to get one question that we have got in the chat, but
Mhm.
yeah, I'll bring that here. We had Suraj who was having this question, which I posted it again here. You mentioned about version control being an issue with Excel based audit. That brings a big uncertainty and also question of the veracity of the whole process and exercise. Are these
Mhm.
examples driving adoption of automated tools that bring in an element of verifiability? Is what I think Suraj has asked for. So your take on it,
Yes,
Giri.
that's a valid question. And Suraj is right. What Suraj is saying is what people are experiencing, and it is one of their driving factors to move away from Excel to a tool-based solution. Now, regardless of the tool vendor, the primary thing that a tool has a massive advantage over Excel sheet is versioning and audit trails, which an Excel sheet can never have.
Hmm.
Now, if you do not know what happened, who changed it, what time they changed it, why they changed it, and was it changed at all to begin with, or did something change at all, the level of trust is in during an audit and also amongst an organization, different teams itself is greatly reduced. Because an Excel is, say, remember, Excel is something that is vastly used by organizations, not only during audits, they use it to store data or to store information. They use it as a uh, information that feeds to certain slide decks, and these slide decks go upstream, go right up to the little board of directors. Somewhere down the line, if something was changed and nobody knew who changed it, and lots of people had access to it, the level of trust decreases. Confidence in a functions organizer, the way of work itself is lost. So this is one of the greatest advantage that the tool has over Excel.
Great. Good pointers there. I think, Suraj, thank you for asking that question. And we have one question that is from, it's an appreciation from Mohammed, which has put this. Giridhar, great is what he said, Giridhar Gandharajan.
Thank you.
And I have Pooja saying that this is a great session. I enjoyed listening to you, right? So this is what I think is the pointer
Thank
that
you.
we want to get. Thank you, Pooja. With this, I would like to take out some of the pointers that we have taken as takeaways. One is a practical map of last mile audit failure patterns and how preempt them. That's the first point that have taken it. A clear separation of controls versus evidence and what audit grade proof really means. So that's the second pointer I have noted. How to reduce risk from Excel based compliance and build traceable evidence systems, right? We spoke about documentation and other stuff, right? Using a tool. How do you recognize control scope, signal versus noise to scale responsibility. So that is what we say. And in 2026, review continuous compliance influenced by modern frameworks and fast evolving regulations is what we are trying to look at, right? So that's the takeaway. That now,
Right.
if audit readiness keeps breaking at the last mile, the fix isn't more of effort side, it's better control design, clearer ownership, stronger evidence, and continuous cadence is what we want to look at as a closing statement for, right? And if you have any pointers that you want to help us, let us know. Drop saying that last mile, we'll share a simple audit readiness checklist with controls, evidence, and cadence that we can share with you, right? So that's what we wanted to show as part of the podcast that we have. Are there any final pointers that you want to add before we conclude the session?
The final point that I would like to say is uh, tools, Excel, audits, evidences, workflows, all of these are fine, but the underlying foundation for all of this is people's commitment and discipline. That breaks it. You can be very well disciplined even with Excel, but it demands exceptional level of discipline. It's probably not practical in the everyday office chaos that happens, but that is level zero. It's people.
Thank you for that, Giridhar. I think with this, we would like to say that you can connect to our speaker. The link is scrolling below, and you can connect to him, talk on GRC pointers, any pointers that you want to take some help from Giridhar. You can reach out to him. That's the link that is there on LinkedIn. And Giridhar, with this, we would like to conclude our session and thank we have to the audience. Thank you for joining. People who asked the questions. It's been great having you people and your questions on the session here. We have streamed this podcast live to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Do watch us and follow us. We have a sign up tool also, which we had dropped in the screen. If you want to test a tool, you can sign up with this one. I'm bringing it up here. You can scan and use the tool for one process and see how it can be done. So that's what we have to offer here. And with this, Giridhar, thank you for joining us and great having you, and good day, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.